Hello, everybody. I'm not really on camera there. Welcome back as we are joined, Kevin and Beth and I are joined by Michael Witwer. Super excited to have you on here, Michael. Do you prefer Mike or Mike? It's Mike or Mike?
Mike is fine. We're all friends here, Jeremy. Mike is fine.
You have one choice. Yeah, now you're going to start singing over there. I'm going to apologize to everyone now because she is being vocal, and I think she's just going to continue being vocal throughout the rest of the day. Yeah, because you're not getting what you want. However, with that said, Mike is whether you know or not, I think you've probably seen some of Mike's publications before, and you might actively be aware of that as well. But why don't you go ahead and just throw out some of the books that you have taken part in, as well as your new solo endeavor?
Wow, thank you, Jeremy. Thanks for the this warm welcome. I'm going to apologize in advance because I was just telling my friends here, I'm recovering from laryngitis. I was literally like almost unable to talk until about yesterday. So if I sound a little like Rod Stewart, it's because it's not me. It's I'm more Bryan Adams today, maybe, but you get the idea.
Okay, right, yeah.
So I'm gonna thank you, Jeremy. I'm an author, and actually, I got to know Jeremy there actually randomly because I think I was running a book giveaway online. I think he happened to take part, right. And he actually won one of my first book giveaways. That's actually how we connected originally. So kind of a small world. Anyway, so yeah, I'm an author. I write books. I guess that's the definition of an author. Mostly about Dungeons and Dragons. So that's where the rubber hits the road here, right? So I wrote a book. My first book was called Empire of Imagination, which was a biography about the co-creator of D&D, Gary Gygax. So that's what Empire of Imagination. That was 2015. That really kind of rolled into a bunch of other projects that I've done since. So anyone that has seen a book called Art and Arcana, which was a visual history of D&D that came out in 2018, and that was followed by Heroes Feast that Jeremy just showed us there, which was the first D&D cookbook, excuse me, in 2020. And then that's rolled over into a few other things. Earlier this year, I finished the first D&D visual dictionary by DK, the Legend of Drizzt Visual Dictionary, which was super fun.
Nice.
And then most recently, I just finished a book called Lore and Legends, which is a sequel to Art and Arcana, actually. It's basically a visual history of the brand over the last 10 years, right? So Lore and Legends, Jeremy's got that there. And then we actually finished a sequel to Heroes Feast called Heroes Feast Flavors of the Multiverse, which is so it's another D&D cookbook, and then as Jeremy suggested, I just finished my first published novel, actually. So all of those, as weird as it sounds, they're like, wait, those are all nonfiction? It's like, yeah, they're nonfiction, but they're about fictional stuff. It's kind of weird. But my first honest novel was a book I just finished. It's a middle grade fantasy book called Vivian Van Tassel. Here it is, Vivian Van Tassel and the Secret of Midnight Lake, which is, surprise here, heavily inspired by D&D, heavily inspired by D&D.
So a theme here. No.
Are you seeing some common threads?
Yeah.
I write books and I love writing books, and so you can tell I not only like writing, but I like writing about things that I care about a lot, and D&D and tabletop role-playing games in general happen to be something that are very near and dear to me.
Awesome.
Yeah, from the chat, Raven says it's a great book. She's already gotten 2 people to buy it, and it's funny because, I am obviously not a middle schooler, but I picked it up and really enjoyed it. As long as you're open to enjoying books, I feel like there really shouldn't be an age limit on what you're reading. So I definitely recommend it. And this is actually,
honestly, Jeremy.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry. It's just to your point. It's a sweet spot for a lot of people that grew up with Percy Jackson's, Harry Potter's, Fablehaven. Take your pick. A lot of people still love that's their favorite type of reading, no matter how old you are. And my book is written in that same vein. So thank you for picking up and checking it out.
Totally, absolutely. Looking forward to the sequel.
It is intended to be a trilogy. It is a series.
Excellent.
And again, I'm sure we'll have time today. I'll be happy to let in some of the inspirations behind it and talk a little bit about it. Or I'm happy to now, but I'll go wherever the wind takes me today.
Gotcha.
Again, in my best Rod Stewart
I just wanted to throw out there that this copy of Lore and Legends, I get the two mixed up because I have the other one, the old D&D book, sitting on my shelf back there. This is the one that we are giving away. There's a raffle. If you go and there's a $25 option for donations, pick up a ticket with that, and you can be entered into winning this copy that was sent to me by Michael. So thank you very much for that. It's greatly appreciated. And it's great to have you here. What should we start with, Beth and Kevin?
Oh my gosh. I mean, now I'm really excited about Vivian Van Tassel, so I kind of want to talk about that.
Again, once you get me going on this stuff, I'm going to warn you. I'm going to go. Again, I'll
That's
go
what we're
Rod
here
Stewart,
for.
Brian Adams,
Right.
wherever. Okay, here we go. Firstly, let me just say I'm so excited about your stream today. And again, Extra Life I happen to know really well. Amazing charity. So please, everybody out there, donate to the stream today, Extra Life. This is an incredibly great cause. And thank you all for, 12 hours. Am I hearing that right? 12 hours of streaming today. So
You bet.
wow, that's really my hat's off to you on that one. We're here talking about a lot of things, including tabletop role-playing games. So Vivian Van Tassel was my love letter to tabletop role-playing games, but in a novel form, right? And so I actually, it all comes back to the first book that I actually talked about and mentioned today. This book here was my first book I wrote in 2015, Empire of Imagination. It was like a narrative. It's a nonfiction. It's a biography about Gary Gygax, but it was written in this real narrative nonfiction style, if anyone that's read it. So it almost kind of reads like a novel, and people really, really kind of appreciated that about the book. But when I did this first book, during the research process, one of the things that I landed on about Gary's childhood that I thought was like super interesting was that when he was a kid in the town of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, I know Lake Geneva is where D&D was born. For those of you that are not in the Midwest, Lake Geneva, they used to call it like the Newport of the West. So it's this really unique town. It's in southern Wisconsin. It's got this beautiful deep fishing lake, huge, 20 miles around fishing lake that's there. And otherwise kind of not very, otherwise it's kind of farmland around and prairie pasture and stuff like that. So it's in southern Wisconsin. And so what Lake Geneva became many, many years ago, about 250 years ago, it became this like country home to wealthy Chicago and Milwaukee families. Like think of it that way. So families like the Schwinn family or the Maytag family or the Wrigley family. And when I say those names, like, yes, those ones, they have mansions on the lake of Lake Geneva, right? So it's a really unique town. It's a really beautiful little idyllic town. It's about an hour and a half from Chicago, about an hour and a half from Milwaukee. So Gary grew up there. Gary, the whole thing, TSR was based there. That's just where all the D&D stuff happened. So when I was studying about Gary, when I was writing that first book, I landed on this really interesting fact that he used to talk about, that when he was a kid, he used to love to wander the abandoned ruins of the Oakwood Sanitarium. And of course, right, when you're at tabletop role-playing game, the word sanitarium gets your ears, perked. Yeah. But so this is a true story, though. When he was a kid, when he was between about 10, 13 years old, in those days, in the 50s, when he grew up, there was literally an abandoned sanitarium on the hill of Lake Geneva. When you drive into Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, you kind of drive into this bowl. You drive down a hill on Route 50, and you drive into town. That hill is what they call colloquially Catholic Hill, because there's a Catholic church on one side of it. On the other side, like literally the highest place in town was where Oakwood Sanitarium was. It was this 4-story Romanesque, like really ornate Romanesque building that literally like perked over, like it kind of, you might say it peered over kind of at the town from this high hill. And when Gary was a little kid, it was abandoned. And I've seen pictures of this, and you can't even quite believe this was a real thing. It's stranger than fiction, just in the respect that it was about as creepy looking as you can even imagine. I mean, it was just like, this big, austere building on the hill. In fact, maybe I can find a picture of it and share it at some point here while we're going.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's wild. And so, Gary, the thing you did when you were a young Lake Geneva, troublemaker, is you would go cross the fence and you would go wander around the abandoned ruins, right? Of course you did. That's what you did. So when I started looking at this, I wanted to get the detail about what's the deal with Oakwood Sanitarium and so forth. What I started landing on all of these different sanitariums, and there was like a half dozen sanitariums in Lake Geneva. And what's weird about that is that it's a town of like 8,000 people. It's not a big town, in the summer they get a ton of people there vacationing, but year round it's not a big town. Like, why is there 6 or 7 sanitariums in Lake Geneva? It's a tiny little town. So you might see where I'm going with this a little bit, maybe not. When I found that out, I landed on this really interesting, you call it a prompt, a what if. I just thought it was fascinating that the same town where D&D was born had all of these sanitariums. So the what if became, what if the people in Lake Geneva, for the reason it had so many sanitariums is because people kept getting committed for seeing delusions. In other words, they would see weird things like a bear with the face of an owl in the woods, or they would see a floating eyeball with 10 eye stalks on its head floating around the trails or whatever, right? And these people, of course, would tell these wild stories and they would be committed, which is why they had so many sanitariums. And so I think you see where I'm going. The what if is, what if Gary didn't create D&D based on what he was imagining? What if he created it based on what he was seeing?
Ooh.
That led me to this town of Midnight Lake and the story of Vivian Van Tassel and the secret of Midnight Lake. So anybody that reads the book, and certainly anyone that knows the story of D&D or Gary, will see a lot of direct analogs. You know, I don't have owl bears, but I have vulture bears, and I don't have beholders, but I have leer spheres and things of that nature. So,
Cool.
but the idea, of course, that this stuff is all real, and Vivian comes to this new town, and she starts playing the game Beasts and Battlements. Sorry, had to. The Beasts and Battlements, and sure enough, she comes to realize that she basically comes to find out that she finds these case files and starts kind of comparing notes about things she's finding in this game, Beasts and Battlements, and these case notes from these old sanitariums, and all of a sudden things start to connect in a really unusual way. So I think it's really fun for anybody that likes tabletop role-playing games, anybody that likes a good mystery. I think it has kind of all of that. And again, it's really, again, primarily for middle grade readers, think like 9 to 12 years old. But I actually believe that there is a certain level of gamer that perhaps people of our generation who, if you like the history of D&D, you might be pretty interested in it as well. So that's my spiel on Vivian Van Tassel and the Secret of Midnight Lake.
Nice. Yeah, I definitely, there were a lot of connections throughout the book reading that I was like, oh, that's this and this is this and all that. But I have to ask, so the naming scheme for the monsters, what did you use to rename some of those like kind of iconic monsters so they weren't like, you know, stepping on IP and stuff like that, but like what was your process there?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great question, Jeremy. Yeah, because right, so everything is inspired by, and of course it's not just about renaming. I had to change the monsters for a number of different reasons, right? You know, I didn't want to. I work very closely with WotC. I've got a great reputation with the D&D people, and in fact, there was even a time where we had talked about doing this as an official D&D thing. That was actually discussed with some of my partners over there. Ultimately, we kind of mutually decided that it was better to kind of stay the course I had with Simon & Schuster, who was already producing the book no matter what. The question is whether it would be like licensed, right? And that has a whole layer of things upon it. But so we decided to kind of separate. But as a result, then I can't use D&D IP on screen, as it were, right? I can talk about D&D all day long, right? That's not so much the issue. A lot of people have actually asked me that question, like, well, you know, for example, you mentioned Harry Potter in the book. How can you do that, but then not mention, you don't mention D&D? Well, the reason is I can't bring Ron Weasley into the story. I can't bring Hermione Granger into the story. If I did that, I'd be in trouble. Similarly, I can't bring Strongheart or an owlbear, or so. I can't bring those on screen without stepping on some toes over there. And so again, it became necessary that everything kind of has an analog. And again, anyone that knows D&D will probably see through some of those analogs. However, it also occurs to me that it's a wholly original story. So any 8 to 12-year-old reading this book, it's probably all brand new to them. I don't expect them to understand like, oh, get it, Beasts and Battlements is like D&D. Maybe they know D&D, but that's not the point. It's not supposed to be a wink and a nod to them. It's supposed to be a great mystery story, right? So the answer to your question, ultimately, Jeremy, is I had great fun with it. I had great fun with it. And honestly, because I could do whatever I wanted, it was really liberating to be like, well, I can make any monster I want. Some of them have some similar characteristics of D&D things. And I suspect that readers of, say, yours and my generation will probably see some of those similarities. So yeah, have fun with it. Something that's kind of an eyeball thing. It's very different than a beholder, but calling it a leer sphere, kind of fun, right? It's a leer sphere because he's a spear and he's got eyeballs on him. So
it made me giggle.
Yeah.
I'll admit.
So the answer is I had fun with it. I wanted it to be fun. I wanted it to be lighthearted. It's not meant to be this like really dark, sinister. I mean, some of it is, right? It's supposed to be dark and sinister in the same way Percy Jackson or Harry Potter is. But it's not meant to be like keeping kids up all night. I mean, that's not the idea, right? That's let Stephen King do that.
I wanted to ask what drew you to writing a story for that age demographic?
That's a great question. I think I guess maybe it was somewhat autobiographical, and I was talking about some people like their favorite type of reading is that middle grade or young adult reading.
Yeah.
I think I'm one of those, actually. I don't know that I've ever had more fun, whether whether I was a young person or whether today, I'll still read middle grade and young adult stuff all the time, and I think it's wonderful. So I think about people like Sarah J. Maas. I think she's one of the best writers on the planet, not just for young adult, like for anything. I think about people like Brandon Mull, who wrote Fablehaven and a number of others, like wonderful writing, like great storytelling and kind of fun and lighthearted. And it tends to move in a really, really kind of wonderful way. So again, I love adult fiction as well, but I will say that that's some of my favorite type of reading, just because it moves so quickly and it's not trying to be more complicated than it is. And there's something really beautiful about that.
Absolutely. That's wonderful.
It's amazing. So yeah, you said it's planned to be a trilogy. When is the next one due out?
That's a good question. I'm writing it right now.
Okay.
And I don't want to be a George Martin and promise
We're not gonna tie you down to something. That's okay.
I'm joking.
You made the joke before I did, honestly. So
I would love to be a George Martin. I'm just going to say it. I'll take his resume.
Sure.
No, so I'm writing it right now. I expect if things go really well, I might have it done in the next 6 months or so.
Oh, nice.
So I mean, again, if things go really well, maybe we'll have something out by 2025. If things go really well and everything picks up in the right way. And there's I actually have a lot of concepts right now that have kind of, I'm finding myself with 4 or 5, I think, reasonable novel concepts that I kind of want to move forward with. But this is the first one. So, fingers crossed we'll get it done.
Awesome. That's like us with gaming. There's always something else we want to do. Always something else we want to run. So yeah, I feel you on that. It's amazing.
Oh boy. I've got I don't want to steer us away from Vivian if we've got more questions, but I do want to know, with all of the, cookbooks that you've written, what are your favorite recipes that you've, developed, stumbled upon, tested? I mean, I'd love to hear that.
Well, can do. Okay. So, the first Heroes Feast, it came out in 2020. And what was really interesting about that book, D&D was very much at a high point. Certainly, I mean, like, that's where it was hitting its kind of 5th edition. The Zenith started around 2020. The brand had been building very rapidly, but 2020 was a huge spot for the game, largely because of the pandemic, right? Yeah. All of a sudden, streams like this, and the notion that people could play on really good virtual tabletops like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds, whatever. All of a sudden, everybody is holed up in their home, and they needed social connection, and D&D became the one of the stars of that show. So by 2020, the irony of the whole thing was, by October, by the time the book came out, is that not only were people playing a lot of D&D, but people were doing a lot of cooking at home and baking, like a ton. So when Heroes Feast came out, it was an instant success. I'm not going to say to our great surprise, but we were pretty surprised. I mean, again, I never saw myself writing a cookbook, but here we were. And so we really put a lot of heart and soul in that book. It was really important for us that book was not gimmicky. Like it would have been so easy to like slap a D&D logo. Oh, look, D&D mac and cheese, just what we need.
Yeah.
Right? We were like, no, we're not. We don't even want to do it if it's going to be that. So
I mean, they did do Magic the Gathering Hot Pockets. I'm just going to throw that out there.
That is true. That is true. Yep.
no, it's just, I mean, like, there's a lot of really good thematic fantasy cookbooks these days, but there are kind of two types, and one of them takes the content matter really seriously. Like the Song of Ice and Fire one's really good. Like, there's a lot of really good ones, right? But then there's some that are like very like, oh, look, we did like a rhyme with this. Like, it's just some to me are just gimmicks. They're kind of money grabs. We didn't want anything to do with something like that. So the way we approached it was like, you know what, we want to make. No one's ever done a food source book for D&D. That was actually how we thought of it. We thought the opportunity here is actually to add meaningfully to the canon and the lore, and really do a deep dive on food exploration. And so what's weird about it is that, consider the team, we had involved. It was me, it was Kyle Newman, who we had just written Art and Arcana together, and John Peterson. And John, if you don't know John Peterson, people in the scholarship space of D&D, they all know he's like the top person. John has really reinvented the way we understand the game. And I mean, he was the one that really was the first person to really rip out all of these old fanzines and like all this archaic, dusty, archival stuff, and really figure out the story of D&D. And I got to know him when I was writing my first book. And so John is really kind of the preeminent, expert on the history of the game. Long story short, the way we wanted to approach it was like we were going to dig through everything, and we had spent a lot of time looking through D&D stuff, but we had never done it through the lens of food. So you kind of start over, weirdly enough, and you look at all these things in a new way. Give you an example. If you're ever playing Castle Amber, the original Castle Amber adventure, or if you're ever playing, if you're ever playing Village of Hamlet or Keep on the Borderlands or whatever. If you don't think about those through the lens of food, it's just an afterthought. Maybe the dungeon master will use the little food list. That's it. Now, Castle Amber's a little different. That actually has like some thematic food stuff. I'll leave that alone for a second. But long story short, it's just kind of an element of realism that the DM may want to use, so that when you go to whatever tavern, here's a list of food that the people can buy, and it's 1 silver piece for that and whatever. But we've never had cause, and who would have, to like really look through everything D&D had ever put out and like look at the food stuff and what's coming along. Now, fortunately, Ed Greenwood spent a lot of time with it. And so Forgotten Realms, of course, he's the creator of Forgotten Realms. Ed Greenwood obviously is a foodie. He loves it. He's thought a lot about it. And so what really was a difference maker was, outside of that research, being able to reference like Volo's guides and like the Aurora's whole realms guide, things like that. So in second edition, they had put out entire books dedicated to like nothing but raiding taverns and their food. Mm-hmm. And the Aurora's whole realms guide is nothing but literally an equipment catalog of stuff you can order through the Waterdeep establishment called Aurora's Whole Realms. And you can order all this stuff from across. So all of a sudden we found ourselves with this huge like bucket of stuff that we'd never really thought that much about. And a lot of it has really interesting lore. Some of it doesn't. Some of it's just a name, right? But some has like some really interesting lore about it, especially as you get into the Volo stuff. So we really took that book seriously, believe it or not, as much as it sounds like a D&D cookbook. We took it super seriously about finding stuff that was authentic to D&D across the multiverse, and then thinking about the big thing for us was figuring out if we could articulate what the different D&D cultures thought about food. So I promise this is going to answer your question, Beth, eventually. Just give me a few more hours on this. The biggest exciting part of it for us was like, let's really dig into, how do elves feel about food? What's their dining etiquette? How do they source food? So I'll give an example of that. Like, think about the reality of this for a second. In D&D, elves are not immortal per se, right? But they live like 700 years, like more, depending on if they don't die by unnatural means, right? Like being killed by a spike in the Tomb of Horrors. They live a long time, right? So think about food as a means as a means of sustenance to survive. Elves would think about food very differently than, say, a human would. Humans by comparison are in a rush. we have to like eat to like live and do more stuff, and we got to get stuff done. Elves would think very differently about it, right? So we really dug into that, and we read all of these old splat books from second edition, all this stuff that really focused on these different cultures. And so we wrote these kind of, again, it was meant to be kind of source book type material about what elves feel about food and how they prepare it and how they source. A lot of elves are vegetarians, for example. Like that, there's a lot of lore behind that elves have such a prize on life that many of them don't want to eat meat. Some do, what elves typically do, but other types of elves won't. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff in that. So that's how we built that. Now, to answer your question, Beth, in the first Heroes Feast, I did cook through the entire book. I had like notes in it that I even worked on with the chef and so forth. Almost the entire Elven section, I love almost the entire Elven section and the entire Halfling section. So, sorry, to bring you back, the book is structured by these different fantasy cultures. That's how we did it in the first book. And so, like, the Halflings section is appropriately decadent in everything that we do.
Right.
They love all their fresh vegetables and herbs and stuff, but they also have really decadent first breakfast and second breakfast and or morning feast and evening feast, as they call it in the realms. So we really went far on that. But the Elven section has all of these beautiful, like, for example, like there's the dragon salmon is like one of my favorite dishes in the book. That's actually from Eberron, believe it or not.
Nice.
And then there's the ratatouille dish, which is, what did we call it? What's the dish called? There's a ratatouille dish. Let me find it here. Even show a picture. That is maybe my favorite dish in the book. It's vegetarian, and it is actually the dish, for any Dragonlance fans out there, this is meant to be the dish that they eat when they go to Qualanost, and they eat this delectable. So for those of you who don't know Dragonlance, the heroes are basically chased all over, like everywhere. The whole book they're being chased. The first one anyway, Dragons of Autumn Twilight. And they end up going to Qualanost, which is like Rivendell. Like they go into the woods and they go into Qualanost. And it's got this beautiful like ivory spire with this like crystal back like balcony thing. And they have this awesome meal of what it says in the book is like vegetables and whatever. Like it's clearly intended like it's like a no meat meal, right? And so we worked with the chef and like we really dug into the lore on this. And I'll find it eventually because I love this dish, but it's I think we call it Qualinesti vegetable stew, but it's basically a ratatouille, and it's a really beautiful one. So that's one of my favorite dishes. Oh, there it is. So there it is. It's this just beautiful rustic. In the picture, it's rustic, but again, the way they serve it in Qualanost might be a little bit different. So anyway, so yeah, those two sections are my favorite, but honestly, just about everything in this book is really good. And by the way, I would say the same about the new one as well. And again, I can bend your ear about the new one as well. But that one, I'll give you the cliff notes on it for what it's worth. So the new flavors of the multiverse. So the first book was so popular that 10 Speed right away wanted to do another one. And they knew that when we had done our original research for the first book, we had like hundreds of dishes left over, right? Remember, we had done all this research over 50 years of D&D history. So we had like stuff coming out of our ears that we had at least a name or a concept or a mention here, whether it be from a novel or a module or a source book, whatever it might be. And so we had tons of things left over, and 10 Speed knew that. So they wanted us to do a sequel. They hired us for that right away. And so this one's coming out actually next week. Yes. Flavors of the Multiverse. What's cool about this book, so firstly, again, it's the same scope in the respect that it's got all of these like great dishes. We worked with the same chef. By the way, I'm remiss to mention a lot of the magic behind this. The chef we worked with is a person named Adam Reed, who a lot of you might know from PBS. He's one of the stars of America's Test Kitchen. If anyone's ever watched that. Adam Reed is the guy that always comes on like, oh, I've got this new potato skinner. He likes to test kitchen gadgets. He does all kinds of different things, but that's one of the things he does. So Adam's a brilliant chef. And so he is the one we work with to actually like bring these dishes to our realm, right? To our reality. So we worked on this with him as well. By the way, my brother joined the fold again on this as well. He actually dropped out for the first Heroes Feast because he was too busy. He joined us back for this one because he was on all of the Art and Arcana books and so forth. What we did with this one, which was super fun, is we we upped the ante. We basically took everything people loved about the first book and we turned up the volume to 11, like across the board. So believe it or not, like take this picture, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So everyone might look at that as, okay, well, that's one of those pictures that, you know, Microsoft puts on your screensaver before you log in or whatever. so this is a castle in Northern California that we rented to shoot for this book. So
Wow.
one thing that we didn't, that bothered us a little bit about the first Heroes Feast, didn't bother us. It was fine. Food photography, when you do a cookbook, tends to be relatively close, and we were on set for the whole thing, right? It tends to be relatively close, and which is fine. And we went to a lot of trouble in the first book. We actually had a bunch of like famous D&D artifacts made. Like you'll see in the first cookbook, we had the Hand of Vecna made. You couldn't buy it from WizKids yet. We had a dragon orb made. We had a bunch of like D&D artifacts made, right? And then we had a bunch of other things that we brought to the photo shoot. We helped them style everything. It was really a very collaborative process. But again, one thing that was kind of not bothersome, but it was what it was, is that the food photography tends to be close. And we were like, we want to like be able to bring that out. We want to bring you into the D&D world. How do we do that? And so when we did this book, we were like, we need a castle for the photo shoot. We need to be able to shoot in dungeons. We want to see suits of armor. We want to see weapons. We want to see wells. And so we actually rented this castle. I just called Castillo de something in Northern California. And we shot at this castle so we could do bigger shots and really feature the food and really bring you into the world a different way. The whole idea with this is translating D&D into our world, right? And so this was just super fun. And unlike the first book, what we did, this one's more locational. So you start at the Yawning Portal. It has a whole narrative story of these 4 D&D characters, these idiots that we actually chose from the first book. We actually, this first one, basically we chose 4 kind of random characters from the front of this and said, well, these are going to be our characters for the next book. And awesome. We follow them around from the Yawning Portal to the Rock of Brawl to Sigil to the Feywild. They go to all these different places. Awesome. Really fun narrative that kind of follows that. And we basically feature food from these different places. And the photography is just off the charts. And that's a huge credit to the people at 10 Speed that, you know, really kind of made this happen. So anyway, so these have been super fun and frankly, unexpectedly, a huge hit with both, I think, both D&D fans, but also just, I think, fantasy and thematic cookbook fans as well. Mm-hmm. I think there's a group of people that just buy, whether it's like World of Warcraft cookbook or the Star Wars, you know, cookbook or whatever it is. People buy these and they've really, really enjoyed this one. Had a lot of good things to say. So we're pretty excited about it.
Amazing. I love that.
That's fantastic.
Nice.
So
I feel like we need to get some. Go ahead, Kevin.
I was just going to ask a little bit of an off-topic question, but Jeremy, if you got a plan,
I was just about to go off topic too, so you should go first.
Okay, yeah. So off topic. Here we go. So Michael, do you still play? Are you still involved in the hobby? Do you game on the regular? Tell us a little bit about your character if you do.
Sure, 100%. Okay, so I'm in a game. I have a long-time gaming group that we play mostly on Roll20 because we're all across the country. We have East Coast to West Coast. It's run by my brother, and who is Sam Witwer. He's just an absolutely spectacular DM. And again, he's the one that taught me to play. You know, so it's just me and him. I only have one brother. He's 3 years older than me. I was his first guinea pig on D&D right. When I was probably 6 years old. I mean, literally. I mean, like, it goes back as far as I can remember.
Yeah, my brother can say the same about me. Yep.
So
gotcha.
For us, it was Saltmarsh. U1 was our first adventure. But anyway, sorry, long story short, the answer to your question is that, so we have, I will tell you during the pandemic, like with so many, we were the most consistent we've ever been. And we were every Saturday, hell or high water, for probably 2 years. We're a little bit more sparse at this point as the world has returned a little bit more to normal. But we still play regularly. To answer your question, I have 2 characters in that campaign. One is a monk. So we play 2 different kind of threads. One is a monk, and one is a half elf. And so again, think half elf. Think like Moldvay basic. So half elf is basically both kind of a culture and a class. It's all of those things together. So he can wear his plate and he can do a little bit of magic, and he's kind of a jack of all trades a little bit. So those are my two characters in those campaigns. That's two distinct campaigns.
Nice.
Right there. And then I actually run a campaign for my kids.
Oh, awesome.
So I have a household of gamers that have no choice but to play with me. And they range, I have a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, I'm sorry, he just turned 7, a 3, 7, 9, and 11.
Oh, wow.
In my house. And so
got a
I run a
full
game
party.
with them.
I love it.
I've got a full party. And I make sure they're balanced when they generate their characters. So I run that game for them, and that's a lot of fun as well. So the answer to your question is I still play quite a bit, but not as much as I want to. Honestly, I sometimes say what Gary was saying by 1975. Gary Gygax was saying even by 1975 is that I feel like all I do is write about games. I never get to play anymore. It feels that way sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. The family that games together stays together, right? Amazing.
I've definitely roped in relatives and friends, and kind of like you mentioned, I started playing D&D at the beginning of the pandemic. It was always something I was curious about, and then, I was like, well, what better time to dive into this thing than right now? And since then, I have not stopped. I have evangelized the game to everyone that I know, and now I've got like actual, in real life friends that have delved into it, and who, we try to meet up in person to play, but a lot of times it's virtual, and it's just the best.
It is, honestly. I think sometimes I think it's hard to Beth, to overstate how essential it was, what a lifeline it was for people, especially during the pandemic. Yeah. I think sometimes you're kind of, oh, it's just a game, whatever. It's like, no, you don't understand. Like, the nature of the game, of course, is fundamentally social, right? It's about connecting with people, about anything else. I mean, right? I think one reason, of course, we could talk a lot about this, why gaming has really exploded over the last 10 years. I think Critical Role and a lot of other things like that really changed the game, I guess, pun intended. But what I would say about it is that I think what people realized, where the game was always mystified, was that, oh my gosh, playing a tabletop role-playing game is just sitting around with your friends and laughing and making jokes and having fun and kind of telling a story together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And boy, did people need that, especially when we were cut off from each other. I mean, 2020, I mean, my gosh, and 2021 for that matter as well. I mean, really, there was a good, 2 honest years, maybe more, where people were really cut off. And so the idea of being able to connect in that way, I think, was a lifeline to millions of people across the country. I'm really glad you were able to pick it up then. I think a lot of people did. And a lot of people have stuck with it, since then, because they've realized what great fun it is. It's an awesome pastime.
Absolutely.
Definitely fun.
I do have to ask, just in case I don't want to run out of time, but Raven from the chat yesterday, I asked if anyone had questions for you. And so Raven had posted that she was wondering, what is your favorite AD&D module?
Sure. That's very doable. Okay, so favorite module is Saltmarsh. Saltmarsh, Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh came out in, I think it was 1981. It was actually an AD&D UK module. It came out in the UK. But it was a huge module here. And it's good for like 1st to 3rd level characters. I actually have it right over there. I just can't reach it because my cord.
I know. I keep seeing you look over to. I'm assuming it's a bookshelf full of.
You should see this thing. I mean, you should see it. Anyway,
I love it.
So, it's kind of like Jeremy's, but it's there, not here.
Yeah.
So Saltmarsh is probably my favorite, but it might have more to do with the memories associated with it. It was the first module I ever played as a kid. I also ran my own kids through it. I actually recently finished that just a few weeks ago, and I think what I love about it is, so modules, so firstly, they reworked it for 5th edition. You might know this. So Ghosts of Saltmarsh, they basically took the whole Saltmarsh series. So it's U1 through U3, because Saltmarsh was a trilogy. Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, Danger at Dunwater, and I was going to say The Last Command, but that's the 3rd book in the Star Wars Timothy Zahn series. Whatever the 3rd one is, I'm blanking on the 3rd one. Anyway, so that was originally a trilogy, but there was also a lot of interstitial Saltmarsh stuff built for Dungeon and Dragon magazine over the years. So they took all of that and put it together into a cohesive campaign, and that's what you see with Ghosts of Saltmarsh, which is really well done. 2018, I think. So anyway, I recently ran them through the first module of that, which is Sinister Secret. And one thing I just love about it is, I don't want to give away any secrets of it because, well, it's because it's the sinister secret. I can't do that. I also, because it would spoil kind of like one of the big ahas.
If, it kind of does if you know.
Yeah, those who know it. But modules in those days in particular, and it's not a better or worse, it's just different, but it's something I like to really enjoy. Modules would give you this really austere kind of map, literally and figuratively, of like rooms and stuff in rooms, and then like, and then kind of you had your map, and they wouldn't explain that much about what was going on. Saltmarsh does explain a little bit more than most, but I'll point you to something like B2. Keep on the Borderlands. So Keep on the Borderlands is the weirdest collection of, in the Caves of Chaos, it's all of these like caves of different creatures that are all kind of adjacent to each other and on different levels. And it never explains what the hell, how did this happen? What is this about? It doesn't, but so the implication is that was Gary Gygax at the time saying, no, that's for you to figure out, Dungeon Master. Mm-hmm. You can figure out why you've got goblins in this cave and hobgoblins over here and an ogre. Again, I don't want to give away too much of what's there. You figure it out. And there's this temple that I don't want to share too much about, but it's like, what's that doing there? So a lot of this stuff, but he gives you enough. And again, Saltmarsh is very much this way as well. They give you enough to work with. They give you a couple of hooks, and then they kind of tell you, the Dungeon Master, figure it out, come up with your own thing. And there's something really kind of magic about that. But again, I'm not saying better or worse, because again, I have to say the kind of work that they've done at WotC over the last 10 years with really fleshing these things out and creating a really spectacular narrative, probably better than one that most of us are going to come up with, on the fly as we're trying to figure it out. But still, there's something about that. So for me, Saltmarsh is probably my favorite original AD&D module that is playable. I have played a one-shot. We did do this in high school. I did play a one-shot of Tomb of Horrors. Oh, yeah. Tomb of Horrors is my favorite module. Uh-huh. In fact, actually, check this out. So a friend of mine made me a pillow.
Oh, awesome.
This is the Tomb of Horrors map.
Yeah.
And she made me a pillow.
That's rad.
That's amazing.
Because Tomb of
Michael's
Horrors,
friend, I'll give you my address, and we can send one over here too.
So, Tomb of Horrors, for those of you who know it, so this is of course the home of the infamous Serac, the Demi-Lich or the Arch-Lich, depending on what edition you're in, actually.
Oh yeah.
So, Tomb of Horrors is such a meat grinder, and it's so comically dangerous.
Yeah.
That you have to kind of just I don't know, you just have to kind of tilt your head and say, okay, this is what's happening. And, doing it as a one-shot obviously took the stakes some out of it, right? So when we did it in high school, my brother DM'd it, and he let us obviously level up to the appropriate point. But what was interesting about that exercise, this is the original Tomb of Horrors, which of course was an AD&D module. Before that, it was a D&D tournament in 1975. And then they've resurrected parts of it for 5th edition. They actually remade it for Tales from the Yawning Portal for 5th edition rules. Yeah. And then they also kind of did an extension of it with White
Plume Mountain.
White Plume Mountain was one of them. That's in the same series. But I'm thinking of the new, oh my gosh, how am I blanking on this? Tomb of Annihilation, which is like a sequel to it, basically. But so what's so wild about the original Tomb of Horrors is if you're doing it as a one-shot, which is probably the best way to do it, because you honestly, bringing characters that have been playing for 4 years to the Tomb of Horrors only to see what happens to them when they go in is come on, really? The tears that were shed, no doubt, over the years. But we did it as a one-shot. But what's interesting is that if you haven't played a lot of OD&D or original 1st edition AD&D, one thing that you do start to understand is that players that have made it up to the level appropriate for Tomb of Horrors, which is my recollection roughly 9 through 12, it's a high level adventure, and you have no chance if you're not that level anyway. But if you've been playing through all those 1E edition, 1st edition things, you're super careful. I mean, you grew up in a world where you rolled up a wizard who had probably 1 hit point or 2 hit points at first level. You were lucky that you survived it all. So it's inherent in you that you would have a 10-foot pole and that you're banging the floor everywhere you go, and you walk really slow and you knock on every wall. All that stuff is very built into you if you've been playing 1st edition or OD&D up until you get to Tomb of Horrors. So one thing that I kind of learned through that is that when you play it as a one-shot and you haven't been used to doing that for 2 or 3 years, you're going to die. Because you're going to walk into the adventure thinking, oh, this is meant to be solved, right? It's like, no, this actually was never meant to be solved. This was meant to kill you.
Yeah. I mean, it's literally a dungeon where every single room is designed to be a TPK.
Yes.
It's insane. It's wild. It's not your typical. It's not your grandfather's D&D, as they say.
Well, and the way people die in Tomb of Horrors, it's just it's so comical and like you would laugh if it wasn't so like brutal. So anyway, so Tomb of Horrors is like my favorite, like again, not for playing, but for kind of like admiring and looking at. Tomb of Horrors
absolutely yeah.
That's so great.
So fun.
Oh,
so
gosh.
fun. Saltmarsh is good stuff.
Yeah, no, Saltmarsh is a great one. No, it's been really it's been really gratifying over the last couple of years to see, frankly, to see all these old friends come back. You know, so I've been playing since I was a little kid. So I'm 21 years old. So I probably started playing in '86. Like I was literally like 6 years old. I was born in '80. And of course, I played the same way everyone else did back then. Some friend you knew had an older brother who had D&D books, right? That's how everybody learned to play back then. Yeah. And so my brother became our first dungeon master because he bought said books from that guy, and we started playing early on, right? And so what's so cool right now in today's day and age is that we live in a world where we get to have our cake and eat it too on some level. Like the people at WotC did an incredible job with this 5th edition rule set. I could talk all day about that. But then they bring back all these old friends like a Serac, and they bring back Mordenkainen, and they bring back Volo, and we've got Elminster, and we've got all these people that we've known, Tasha, all these people we've known and loved for all these years, and they're all back in our edition. So it's really kind of fun to see all these old friends that kind of came up in different ways over the years, and now they're all back kind of in this cohesive edition that's got kind of the best of. Well, I mean, again, that's all, I know that's subjective, but kind of best of rules, best of story, best of art, and so forth. And that's a lot of what Lore and Legends we talked about early is about. But to be exact, to I guess give another plug to Lore and Legends. Let me just say really quickly, this book right here. One thing that was so fun about working on this was we had a chance to really unpack what's happened over the last 10 years, right? We had just finished the first 40 years, the Art and Arcana, which was a huge passion project. We all loved it. But the last 10 years has been really special. Like how many IPs that have been around for 40 years, especially something that is like reliant on like old school analog technology, tabletop role playing, right? So by 2012, when like the end of 4th edition era was happening, like D&D was on life support. I mean, you could say whatever you wanted about it, but D&D was on life support.
Yeah.
Yep. And so ultimately, the notion that a game like that had been around for 40 years could have a renaissance the way it's had over the last 10 years, I think was one of the most exciting things. So our whole point with this book, you can call it an art book, whatever you want. It does have 900 images in it. What we wanted to do with it was actually figure out how did this happen? We wanted to answer the question, how did an analog brand that's 40 years old become a star in a digital age? It makes no sense. And of course, at that point, by 2012, when 4th edition was wrapping up, they were not only on life support, they were trying to figure out how they were relevant anymore. Everything about 4th edition was meant to emulate like WoW, World of Warcraft, Dragon Age. They were trying to figure out their relevance in a world of MMOs. And all of a sudden, 10 years later, D&D is, I mean, you've got celebs playing it every day. You've got actual play, streams that are as big as anything on television. You've got feature films. You've got beard oil. You've got everything you can imagine out there that's D&D. How did this happen? We wanted to answer that question. And again, I think we did a relatively good job of doing that, not only through text, but through the visuals. So it's been a really fun story to kind of tell all the different factors that contributed to D&D, like having this incredible rebirth. And part of that was kind of what I was mentioning there, bringing back this old IP that was really kind of untapped. So
awesome.
It's fantastic.
Cool. I love that.
So cool.
have to go pick up a copy of that. I have Art and Arcana, but I don't have the new Lore and Legend, so I will definitely be getting that because I love the Art and Arcana book. I thought it was super cool. I love, you could tell the dedication and you could tell the amount of time that you guys put into it, and that really, to me, as somebody who's a little bit of a book nerd, I was an English/theater major once upon a time. To me, I loved it. I thought it was such a really cool book, and I'm not just kissing your butt because you're sitting here. I promise. I really honestly thought it was a really awesome book. And I think stuff like that is what we need to remember things. You know, it's like a lot of newer gamers, and this is going to sound gatekeepy. I don't mean to sound that way, but a lot of newer gamers don't necessarily know this legacy that you're talking about with these old characters coming back and this old stuff that's been here for a while, building the foundations of the game nowadays. And so it's really cool to have something that really kind of showcases that and really celebrates that. So my hat is off.
Thank you for that. I mean, and again, a lot of it, it's funny, Art and Arcana, again, but I'll come back at 9 o'clock while you're still on your stream, and we can talk about that one for an hour. No, Art and Arcana, let me just say about that, what was most fun about that book, more of an archaeology project than it was a book project. That book was all about finding pieces of art that were in private collections that had been out of the public eye for 40 plus years in many cases. So finding that stuff felt more like Indiana Jones than Eric Larson, or take your pick. I mean, it did. I mean, I remember this vividly, and I promise I'll shut up, but I remember this vividly when John and I, John Peterson, he was out there trying to find everything he could. And I remember one day that we had a shared we had a shared folder that was uploading really slow. I remember at work, I was keeping my eye on this. We had a shared folder, and he had found some stuff that we had been looking for a long time. And I remember him saying something like, "Hey, Mike, check the folder. Like, it's uploading in there right now." And I remember we've been looking for this stuff for over 2 years, 2.5 years, or whatever. And as the thing was like the wheels are spinning and it's uploading really slow, and then finally one pops up, and it's the original Player's Handbook wraparound cover by Dave Trampier that no one has seen without trade dress or bubble ever. It's never been published in its complete native form like that. And then the next thing would come up, it was all of this stuff we had been looking for forever. And it felt like Indiana Jones, like uncovering the Ark or whatever, take your pick. It really felt that way because we realized we were looking at stuff that people hadn't seen, in some cases ever. They had never published it that way. So to be able to find that stuff and get it into a book that people could enjoy it and see it in a different way was one of the most thrilling things in my career ever.
Awesome. So it's like you went on your own little quest, your own little D&D party, got together to find that lost treasure. I love that.
Oh, it was awesome.
Did you ever stop and say, "This belongs in a museum"?
Totally. in fact, and then I jumped off the ship, and the ship exploded, and I stole their artifact.
Absolutely.
How wild is that, by the way? The cross, I never quite understood. The Cross of Coronado, I get that it belongs in a museum, but I think he killed everybody to get it. I'm pretty sure that's what happened, isn't it?
Yes,
Great movie.
That doesn't matter.
All comes out in the wash, you know?
So, out of curiosity, with Vivian Van Tassel, and as that moves forward, are those going to be translated into other languages?
Gosh, that is a great question. I do not know about Vivian yet.
Okay.
In fact, I'll be honest. I don't know about any of the new books yet. I have not seen whether any of those deals have come through yet, or I've not been made aware, I should say, if any of those deals have come through for non-US or non-English translation. I certainly hope so, and I expect they will be. I should expect that, but I'm very hopeful that they are.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of our last books have been done really well that way. For example,
Nice.
even I'm seeing a lot of the Drizzt book I did that came out in March here. I see that it's now in German, it's in Spanish. I think it's coming out in Italian. So it usually takes 6 to 12 months before you start seeing any of those start surfacing. I don't know about Vivian yet, though, so I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one. And I certainly, fingers crossed, I certainly hope so, because
Nice.
I want that book to be everywhere. I really loved working on that book, and for me, it was about, it was something about just really trying to introduce, again, I would say what it does best, or what I think it does best, is it does introduce young people to the notion of tabletop role-playing games. All this history stuff aside, it has a group of gamers in there that are kind of based on people I know and love, and it shows the fun of how these interactions can go in the book. And so I think that's one of the things that a lot of people really like about it.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Well, I'm sure the four of us could sit here and talk for the rest of our 12-hour stream
I know.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
about gaming and nerd history and all of the fun stuff. But Miko has pointed out that we are out of time.
Oh, man, flew by.
Mike, thanks so much for joining us today. Hopefully you can come back to the channel. We'll talk some more. Maybe we'll play a game. Who knows? It'd be
I would
great
love
to
that.
have you.
I'm super grateful for your time today. And please donate to the stream, Extra Life. It's a great charity, everybody. Please do that. Thank you.
Awesome. Sending the link for that right now. And we'll put up all of your stuff for to make sure that people can find where your books are being sold. Thank you again so much. Any last words, Kevin, Beth, Mike, anything?
No, just thank you so much. Yeah, this was a cool opportunity.
This was fun.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Well, I'm really grateful for your time today, and thank you for doing this. I think this is a really amazing effort. So, good luck today. Please donate to the stream, as I said before, and thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody stay tuned. We're going to take a short break, and then I believe there's going to be some cats showing up as Miko runs a game of library cats.
Oh, yeah.
So stay tuned.